S'il vous plaît, Monsieur de Greffier.
Mr. Senator Gorst. Monsieur Senator Farnham.
Present.
Madame la Senator Ferguson.
Présente.
Monsieur le Senator Lafondre. Madame la Senator Valois.
Present.
Madame la Senator Moore.
Present.
Monsieur le Senator Pallett.
Present.
Monsieur le Senator Mezek.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Hélier.
Present.
Madame la Connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Present.
Madame la Connétable de Saint-Sauveur. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brelard.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Cruville.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Present.
Madame la Connétable de Saint-Martin.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean.
Present.
Madame la Deputy Martin.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern. Madame la Deputy de Grouville.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Lewis.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier. Monsieur le Deputy Higgins.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Masson.
Present.
Madame la Deputy Pinel.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Martin.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Ouen.
Present.
Madame la Deputy Doublé.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Labby. Monsieur le Deputy Wickenden.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Sainte-Marie.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Truscott.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Young. Monsieur le Deputy Ash.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Morel.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Guida.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Pierre.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy de la Trinité.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Jean.
Present.
Madame la Deputy de Hegera.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Ayer.
Present.
Madame la Deputy Pershard. Monsieur le Deputy Ward.
Present.
Madame la Deputy Alves.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Pamplin.
Present.
Madame la Deputy Gardner.
Present.
Monsieur le Doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi les gouvernements et les puissances de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, donner le cœur et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et de les conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération et ton accompagnement et la bénédiction réussissent au bien et au soulagement du peuple, qu'il de plus te commettra à le soin. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné à t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi, la reine, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le Senator Gorst.
Sir, Senator Gorst is out of the island attending the British and Irish Council meeting in Northern Ireland, sir.
On state's business.
Monsieur le Senator Lafondre.
The same applies to the Chief Minister, sir.
On State's business.
Madame la Connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Excusez.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Labby.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Young.
Présent.
Madame la Deputy Perchard.
Excusez. Les états sont constitués. I remind members that we will adjourn today at 12:15, as after that there is a service to celebrate the life and service of the Duke of Edinburgh. We now return to the proposition, and the next member listed to speak was Senator Balwa.
So may I withdraw my request to speak, please?
Yes, of course. Deputy Ward, you're the next member listed to speak.
Yes, I will. I actually thought it was about the adjournment, but I will take the opportunity if that's okay. Or I can wait.
We'd be content to hear from you now.
Okay, thank you, sir. This is a really interesting proposition, and I've been through it a number of times. It's quite detailed, and it's a difficult one. And I think it's a difficult one for a lot of us because I will say, I will state at the beginning, and this may be a surprise that although the Chief Minister is not here today, that I do actually think the Chief Minister should be paid more because of the complexity and the importance of the role. And there is another issue that I've always thought of, is that the Chief Minister is going into meetings with a CEO, the Chief Civil Servant, with that important words being civil and servant. And the wage of the Chief Minister is probably a third, a quarter, or 1/5 of that officer. And I think it's a very unequal relationship, particularly when wealth and money is so revered in our society at the moment. We do seem to make heroes of those who make money above those who provide services sometimes. And so it's a very strange setup that we have. But having said that, I will oppose differential pay. I don't think we should be having differential pay at this stage in the history of this assembly. And I'll explain why for a number of reasons. First of all, it's very difficult with the individual politics that we have in terms of the way that selections are made for ministerial posts. So I don't think it is a really clear process. And in particular, assistant ministers, there's no election for assistant ministers. There's no, if you like, job description. There's no real explanation of how they're being accountable for performing the role that they have. And one could say that's true for all states members. I come from a profession where everything you did was scrutinized daily. And at any point, a member of a management team could walk into your classroom and make a snap judgment on your performance on that day, be it good, bad, or indifferent. And that level of scrutiny is happening throughout our public service. And we are effectively public servants. We don't do that. So if we're going to introduce differential pay, it needs to be very clearly identified as to what it's for. I chair a scrutiny panel, and I can say it is a lot of extra work. There's a huge amount to be taken on, as much as anything, because you are working with a range of people, and that's the good thing about scrutiny. You work across the assembly, and I've said this a number of times that I think it's very healthy to work with people who are very different politically from you. I think probably someone who's most different to me is the Deputy of St. Peter. I think we worked very well together on the Education Scrutiny Panel, and it was really educational for both of us. And I think that's a very healthy thing. But as a chair of Scrutiny Panel, you don't have any sort of criteria for what to expect from members. You can't, you're relying on them as individuals to say that they'll turn up for meetings, prepare, etc., etc. And I think if you were to introduce additional pay for being on that scrutiny panel, you'd also have to introduce some sort of criteria for saying, look, if you don't turn up for this number of meetings or do this level of preparation, then I'm afraid you haven't earned your extra payment. And that's going to be very, very difficult to do. because people are very busy, and it's sometimes very difficult to get a meeting together with everyone at the same time, particularly when there's so much going on. So I don't think at this stage it will work. One of the things I would say that we do need to do in this staging of the development of the assembly, if you like, is that we need to have constituency offices that are staffed for deputies. Now that we have deputies in larger districts, there needs to be a central place where every member of that constituency knows they can access their deputy or staff to help them. Now, I know we have the parishes to do that, but the parishes, I think, do very different things at times. Constables do different things, and they're dealing with all sorts of things which, as a deputy, I don't really want to deal with, like gun licenses and so on. I've had an interesting conversation with someone this morning about that. And there is a difference there, and I get that. But the support that we provide as deputies in our constituencies or our districts, which is often unseen by the nature of the job itself, because it's private, because it is personal, and because often it is confidential, is something that the public don't see. With constituency offices that are staffed, one, it supports us and able to do our job properly, and it raises a level of expectation that you, as a states member, are performing a particular role. And I think that can only be healthy for us. It may also, for myself, give me some structure to the job itself. Meeting people in cafes and running constituencies drop-ins in a cafe because the owner of Springfield Cafe is kind enough to give me access. It is not the most professional way to go about doing my job. And I mention this, sir, because I think it's important that as you develop that, then we can look at whether or not roles should be paid differently, because we have a much clearer view of what those roles are. Are assistant ministers and ministers doing so much more than scrutiny chairs, members of the scrutiny, number of different scrutiny panels, deputies in different districts, for example? That analysis, we have no information for that at the moment. And therefore, so any differential pay will be very difficult to define. So I cannot support it. So other than that, and the rest of the proposition, which is quite long, I think an independent review determination is a good idea. I think that obviously there is always a definition of independence that we need to look at. There's independent and there's independent, if you see what I mean. So, and I think, but that's important to have that criteria that we all are all aware of as to how we're going to actually decide on the level of pay. Establishing against an index is important. If we're going to say that we establish states members pay against RPI and have that increase each year, then we certainly can't be saying to our nurses and our teachers and our public sector workers that we're not going to do that for them. So let's be careful what we say here, and let's stick to the actual process itself. So there was one other point I want to make. I just need to scroll down. The reviewing of any system, needs to be clear, and the criteria need to be clear to all states members so that we have faith in what's going on. I am not a believer that we should go back to this time where states members were unpaid. All that does is only attract those who have private wealth to come into this assembly. That is not good for this island. This assembly, and we have to hold our hands up to this, is not truly reflective of the demographic of our island. And a truly democratic assembly should have voices from every demographic in our island, and we don't. And we're not going to attract people if there is not a living standard that can be reached for being here. And I go back to my point about the constituency office and the resources for us to perform our role. With that comes an expectation that you'll perform that role. I have no problem with that whatsoever. And it's a level of professionalism that needs to go to that role. So what I would conclude with is that I don't believe differential pay is a good idea, and I would urge members to vote against that part of this proposition. I have no problem with the other parts of that. I think there needs to be an understanding that scrutiny is a very difficult job, and we all have our roles to play in scrutiny panels. Sometimes It is difficult because people can't fulfil those because of the demands made, and we have to look at those demands to enable people to do their job and look after people as well, so they're performing the best they can. But sir, I welcome the majority of this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Martin, how do you next to speak?
Yeah, so I will speak briefly. I think it could have been on the adjournment, but I did think that we were in danger of ending this debate too soon yesterday, because I was on the subcommittee of PPC, and again, I don't want to get into the rights and wrongs, but if you read the paragraph under the last ward's recommendations about the Chief Minister being paid more and the head of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee being paid more, we put in a paragraph that basically today we would like it to be the last time states members sit around any forum and discuss pay. I've been there when we set the pay in, like as Deputy Ward said, we were paid 4 times a year. It was a big expense amount, little pay, but you know, we've moved on. And I thought yesterday we could be in danger of people. I think we also discussed this around the subcommittee, that anybody, because of the way we are, can bring something back to the Assembly, absolutely understanding. But what I would say, I think along the lines when we're differential pay, and I think recording my last vote was definitely against, but I just wanted to say we will be tying the hands, and Deputy Ward made some excellent points about what we do need, but then again, if we want a new board or person or body to look at the whole of what we do, the whole of what we get paid, our remuneration, I'm not going to even go that word, whatever it is, today, if we don't lift Standing Order 44, we are saying you can look at everything, but I just think that bar is bigger than differential pay, because you will be giving, how do you add up if somebody says, well, I do think those are offices that's needed. That's got to be part of your support, everything. So that's all I wanted to point out. Hopefully this will be the last debate. I will vote this time so the board can look at everything. There are arguments. I think like Senator Volva, I've done every side of the Assembly. I don't think Deputy Volva was in when we did committees, but I've done scrutiny, PPC, PAC, different subcommittees, and assistant minister and minister. And I'm not saying, I would definitely not say any one it's less work. You bring different things to it. But honestly, today I would like to give the new people, and hopefully they'll do it once, they'll do it thoroughly, and we will be benchmarked against something going forward, and everyone knows what it is. So for today, I am going to vote for Standing Order 44, but I do really understand that basically, hopefully, this is the last time, this is your time to speak and vote against differential pay, or for people to look at it. And I think we give everyone the tools to look at it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Labby.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm pleased to follow the speakers this morning, and I wanted really to speak and refer back to Deputy Higgins' speech of yesterday afternoon, because my primary motivation for asking the Assembly to consider allowing differential pay to be considered was because I take on board everything that the Constable of St Martin and Deputy Hegarah are saying, but it is a fact that nobody works the hours of the Chief Minister, and nobody carries the responsibilities of the Chief Minister but the Chief Minister. And I think what the Chief Minister, to put it crudely, what the Chief Minister is on is absolutely ridiculous and harmful for our democracy. So that was the primary reason. Now it may we may need to have, and I thought, so listen, if we take away that stipulation in law that differential pay is unallowed, then this would be the very last conversation we have in the Assembly about our own pay, which I'm sure everyone would welcome. But it may, if the Assembly is not ready to go with that or finds it not too crude, then we'll have to have another conversation at another time. But I just wanted to point that out, and I'm pleased that Deputy Ward picked up on that too. The last two States members remuneration review bodies have both suggested differential pay, and then we were stuck. We had to come back to the Assembly and have a vote about it. And I thought, well, why don't we get rid of it in this new process? I also wanted no PPC chair to ever have to go through what I went through. With 49 people on one side feeling they're not, undervalued, not being listened to, and a body on the other side who felt that doing what this lot want would infringe their independence. It was impossible to make headway, and that is no fault of any of the people who kindly gave their time to sit on the States members' remuneration review bodies, and I add my thanks to them all, stretching back years. But I have come to the conclusion that it's actually an impossible task for the body as was constituted. So I didn't vote for it last time. I was of the same opinion as Senator Mesick and those who've spoken against differential pay, very much so. And the vote the vote in 2014 was for just the Chief Minister to get differential pay, and it lost by one vote, and I've sort of regretted it ever since when I watched what chief ministers do. So that was the motivation for that, and I think this proposition springs from the report that I commissioned as PPC chair, and the Greffier was able to find Dr. Hannah White to compile that report. Now, Dr. White was, and she did it very quickly and very reasonably, and she was the perfect appointment for this because she set up IPSA, the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, who now decide on MPs' pay in Westminster. It's been in place since the general election in May 2010 and followed on from all the expenses scandal, and now they've set up this body, and I thought, well, we want something like that. We don't have to have it as big as that, and it can be done short and sharp and quick each session. And I think if members had spoken to Dr. White, as I had the pleasure of doing, I know she did speak to a few, you would be reassured that somebody like that could do the job going forward, or maybe sitting with others too, if that's what the Assembly feels. But the other thing about this is that whoever is hired now independently to do this work in a short, sharp, efficient fashion can be set parameters by the Assembly through PPC, and members will have the opportunity, if they want to input into the process, members will have the opportunity individually, if they wish to do that, to do that. And I know that most people have felt that a greater understanding of what we do should have been taken into account when pay was being set. So I'm pleased that in general this is being well received. Really want to thank the subcommittee, Councillor St Mon and Deputy Ash, Senator Pallett, the Deputy of St Martin, Deputy Judy Martin, Deputy of Group L. We had 3 meetings of about 1 hour each, and we thought we should put what Dr. White came up with to the Assembly, not try to start talking about what levels of pay and etc., but we should put it to the Assembly, and the idea that we take away the restriction on differential pay, just so that we never have to do this again. But if that's too strong for members, they don't have to vote for it today. But this will be a huge step forward and much more efficient, and I think much better, and I just don't want any other PPC chair to have to go through what I did. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. We know that the PPC chair and the previous ones worked incredibly hard. And in some ways, you could argue also that they should be paid more for the work that they do. But I'm going to come back to that point on differential pay later, because I think it is a nuanced argument, but is ultimately one that I think I don't support for various reasons, certainly not at the current precarious position or uncertain position. And I suppose, let's say that now, just to contextualise the whole of the rest of the proposition, is that we do stand at a very interesting juncture at the moment. Not only, as it has been said already, are we coming out of a pandemic, although in fact we're going through a pandemic really, and it's just changing, and that's been cataclysmic and shaken the way that we deal with societal issues as well as political issues, and it will continue to do that alongside, of course, the ongoing climate emergency. But we also stand at a crossroads where at the next election, for the very first time, we are going to have party politics. It may not be all-encompassing, but it is certainly going to be the case that there will be a number of political parties, and they will do what political parties do, which is to run candidates on slates across the island in various numbers, and they will hope to try and get as many of their party candidates elected as possible, with a view to forming the next government or leading the next government if they can't get an absolute majority. And of course there will still be independent members, and I suspect the independent members will be very successful if they've worked hard during the past 4 years, and if their policies still chime with the electorate. But that is the backdrop which we're running into. And so in fact, we're not talking about ourselves today, which is why I don't mind. I don't have the same discomfort that others might do about debating this, because we're not talking about our pay. We're talking about some future states members and some future politicians' pay after the next election. And I hope that a lot of people in this assembly won't be re-elected necessarily, and I don't mean that in any kind of personal way, because I think we need a change in government. Now, with all that in mind, let's go through the proposition. So I think part one, I think is uncontroversial. I think it seeks to stop these kind of debates happening again. I suppose that part two is a corollary to that propositions to alter levels of states members' pay should not be permitted. I did have some initial alarm bells about this, just I guess for two reasons. The first is that I was of the understanding that, at least in a purist sense, the states should be able to debate any matter that they wanted, and it was the right of any member to bring any such matter to the Assembly. Now, I know that is qualified, of course, because standing orders don't permit for certain things to be debated, but that's usually if they've been debated before, for example, or you know, most things can be debated. And I suppose the concern is maybe theoretical, but you know, how often does the theoretical at some point down the line become a reality? Is that, imagine you had a scenario where the states had been taken over and we had differential pay, and states members had decided to effectively give themselves inordinate pay increases through an independent body which was effectively full of their mates who were giving you know, very large sums of money to ministers, and we also realised that the system had unintended consequences, because the parties that got elected weren't necessarily putting forward the best people for the job, but it turned out that you know, there were a lot of political machinations going on, and one member of the states who'd been elected on an anti-inflation, anti-corruption platform, this is all hypothetical incidentally, said to constituents, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to make sure that states members get paid a realistic amount, not these silly sums that they're getting paid today in this dystopian future. That member of the states wouldn't be allowed to debate that point because there'd be something in the law which stopped them from doing it. You could argue there'll be other ways of raising that issue. They could raise it directly with the board, or they could raise questions, etc. So I guess and I think that's right. I think that on balance, it's probably right that we passed B2. But it doesn't necessarily mean that all arguments about States members' pay will be put to bed. And of course, it doesn't deal with the issue of whether or not a petition would be allowed. So presumably a petition to ask the states to look at their pay could be submitted, but and there should be an in-committee debate that follows from that if it reached 5,000 signatures. And if we didn't allow that debate, it could be seen to stifle democracy. So, of course, there could easily be a way for a states debate to happen, although it wouldn't be via a proposition to alter states members' pay being submitted. I mean, that's a grey area. I just thought I'd flag that up. I think it's right that states members' pay should be linked to an index. I've certainly seen how inflation, particularly in property prices, have been rampant, but states members' pay, certainly for the first 10 years since 2008, was virtually stagnant, if not actually stagnant. And so just by way of example, I remember renting a 2-bedroom flat with 2 bathrooms and parking in the centre of St Helier in a new build in 2009 for £1,000 a month, and I didn't have a car that I needed to use, so I rented the space out for about £120 a month. So my rent was effectively £880 a month for a 2-bedroom ensuite in the centre of the town, new build. And nowadays that property would be much over £2,000 and probably without parking. So I say that because if there are states members in the future who need their salary to live on, and you know they do rent wherever in the island, we do need to make sure that that at least the wages are not atrophied over time, and I think that's the intention there. I think the real concern, I don't have any concerns with parts 4, but I do have a comment to make on part 5, and this is where there could be a tension between part 5 and part 7, which is to do with differential pay. And the words that stood out for me in part 5.2 are that the level of remuneration should be sufficient to ensure that members of the states can enjoy a reasonable standard of living as a result of their position. And okay, that's really interesting, because what is a reasonable standard of living in Jersey? Now, let's remember, this is an issue here because we are applying double standards. We're saying if you're a states member in the future, you should have a reasonable standard of living as a direct result of your remuneration. But we don't apply that to other people in our society. We're saying it's okay for people to not have the living wage. There are members of this assembly who have voted consistently against the living wage. I suspect that there are members of the assembly who would abolish the minimum wage if they were being true to their ideologies. Yet they're going to turn around and vote today for this part of the proposition, which in reality will not only ensure that states members in the future have a living wage, but it will be something far in excess of the living wage. And I think that double standard needs to be highlighted, and it will be and should be picked up on by the public who are listening. And I would challenge all of those members who have consistently voted against the living wage to also vote against this living wage for states members, because they clearly don't think there's any issue in Jersey, and that the issues facing many of our constituents should presumably therefore also be faced by states members. I'll leave that idea out there. I don't have any problem voting for it because I consistently voted to increase the standard of living for many of our most struggling in this community. Now, part 3 is really interesting, isn't it? 5.3, it says remuneration should be set at a level to attract people from all walks of life to serve the island effectively as a states member, mindful of the financial constraints under which the states operate. And I think this really hits the nub, is that what is being a politician about? Wherever you end up, if you're elected in the Assembly, whether it's as a backbencher, as a minister, or as a committee president, you're effectively, the draw for politics should be one of public service. And those who were with me on the senatorial campaign in 2008 might remember there was a question in St. Juan's from a parishioner there, doing the 12 rounds, as many of us at that time in the Assembly did. I know Deputy Higgins did, and Deputy Masson, Deputy, there were others, I think Deputy Southern. Sorry if I've missed anyone, and there'll be the establishment crowd as well. And the question was, would you do this job if you weren't paid for it? And the sous-entendu of that question was clearly states members shouldn't be paid because it was much better in the good old days when states members weren't paid and they made much better decisions. And my answer was yes, I would have done this job because I'm passionate about politics, I'm passionate about ideas, philosophy, and making the island a better place and as good a place as it can be. But I would really struggle to do that, and I probably wouldn't be able to give you my full attention and my full mind and my full heart, because I'll be distracted by having to make a living in another area. And so I think the balance has to be struck. And to be honest, I think that by and large, the balance is already struck. I think it does need to be index linked, but I think that states members are probably paid about the right amount. And I say that because certainly as long as it's index linked, I think it's important that states members don't get so much that they become detached from reality, and that they don't get so little that they don't want to go into the job in the first place. But we're seeing something over and above that at the moment. There is this massive move, concerted effort through the misuse of the media, or the use of the media, from certain vested interest groups in the island. Could be the Chamber of Commerce, it could be the Institute of Directors, which isn't a party, but encouraging people to come forward for election, and is putting people in contact with former ministers. We don't know which former ministers they're putting them in contact to make sure that they get a better class of states member. Read between the lines. That means that we want our own class interests to be elected in the States Assembly. But at the moment, none of us are willing to leave our cosy jobs that maybe pay 6 figures a year to come and do a job where we're going to get publicly scrutinised, because unfortunately we're more interested in making money than we are in public service. That's a view, sir. I'm not saying that everybody in that industry would necessarily be in that position, but what we do know at the moment is that states members, whoever they are, and would-be states members, are probably not doing it for the money. They're doing it for some notion of public service. And of course, there might be ambition there, but you know, I think that is relevant in the job. And I think that brings me conveniently to point 7. And with that in mind, about what is the optimum and fair amount of money to pay states members, should we then have a system where we pay certain positions more than others? In some ways, I can see the attractiveness of removing Article 7, but let's not be naive about this. And I think Deputy Martin, I can see the tension and that she feels in regard to this article. It's because she knows, and I think we all know, that if we vote for Article 7 today, we'll call it Article 7 VII. This effectively is giving the green light to differential pay, and this is saying go ahead and introduce some form of differential pay. We don't know what that will be. And so I think we've got a clear choice in this. If you support and want differential pay, if you want certain members of this assembly to be paid more, possibly significantly more, and probably for other members to be paid significantly less than they are currently getting in the future, then you can vote for this. But first of all, there isn't the level of detail. Secondly, I think it sets a dangerous precedent, bearing in mind what we've said about party politics. I've heard those argue that they would support this if there was a party political system in place, but they couldn't support it now because you have no idea. There's no democratic mandate for the person who ends up as chief minister. I can see that. Is that the end of time, sir?
That's the end of time, Dr. Yes.
All right.
It's your time.
Okay. I'll leave it there. So can I'll just say then that I don't support that. I think it's a dangerous precedent. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. When I first read this proposition, I thought, well, okay, it's reform for those who are going to carry on. I shan't be in the States Assembly in the future when I've served my time, not because I don't enjoy it, not because I don't think I've got a useful contribution to make, but frankly through age. And I feel at my age I should need to hand over to younger members, and also reflecting one's talents do perhaps wane a bit in later life. But nonetheless, I think I'm motivated by the views of members today. And I think we have here a situation that faces, we're going to have a very new structure of the states with the changes that PPC have made and we put into law. And I do think that is going to see some changes in the way the Assembly does work and members within it. And also, I think we've got this group, which I'm very hopeful will bring fruit, which is the subcommittee of PPC being led by Senator Walwa, about the way our ministerial government system works. I certainly think there's lots of things that I think I'm looking forward to being able, hopefully, to give my views there, because I think there are lots of things that will change, I think, some of the dynamics, therefore. And I think we have, if you like, we've taken a very fixed view about equality. And I think that all those things said, I absolutely buy into. I really do understand and share those, what are really valuable ideals being voiced. That is really right. But what we've got here is I think there are what we need to do, I think, is to look for principles of fairness and the need to avoid patronage and to achieve an equitable arrangement that people are happy with, and then to avoid corruption. And I think there are some things that need to be flagged up in the proposals here. I am cautious about the idea of having a single person being given, if you like, absolute sole authority under this proposition to decide on what the structure of pay should be. And that would be, and the proposal says there will be there would be the review would happen by that person at every time there is a new state's term. And so each time there's an election and then there's a new body of members, then there would be that process and then some indexing. Presumably the indexing would work during the intervening years. And that's a single person. Now, of course, in my experience, in all sorts of walks of life, there's rarely an occasion when a single person is the best way of arriving at a decision. Rarely. You members will know my own concerns about that with planning decisions and why I'm proposing changes to planning law to amend that. And of course, when our judges sit in the court, they either sit with a superior number or an inferior number of others. And I think going back to my memory days in committees, in my view, decisions were always improved with the input and listening to other people's views, and there were inbuilt safeguards in that. So a single person I worry about. And I think I was listening to the debate there, I was drawing a parallel with how, I'm not any great, I'm a public sector person, I'm public service through and through, but of course I have spent a number of years working in the private sector for 7 years in financial services and legal services. And I'm aware that obviously pay in those areas, executive pay, is quite a controversial and difficult area. It's just as contentious in the private sector at the top, at that level, as it is in the public sector. And the way they resolve it, they have these things called remuneration committees. And the element that I see missing here is not just in terms of the judgment being made by a single person, although it does talk about a body. So that's a bit, you know, that is very, very ambiguous what we got there. And I think Deputy Johnson raised that quite rightly. So, but I think that needs to be thought that the element that's missing is that following the parallel with the private sector of the senior executive pay, the remuneration committees are accountable to their shareholders. And we see in the loads of debates, you know, in the top level where shareholders revolt and they deal with and they bring into line excessive pay. Well, of course, that's only, you know, they don't bring it fully into line. We all know that because there are massive, ridiculous imbalances between the sort of obscene levels of payment we see at the very top level of you know, some private sector and those levels. It's not across the board, but there is real differences there between that and the major roles in the public sector. But of course, the principle is for, you know, people give a life of public service. And I suppose you only have to look at the UK Prime Minister's salary to you know, I'm no fan of myself of that, but nonetheless, you have to look at the role. And so we don't, applying that to Jersey, this issue of the shareholder, who are the shareholders of that? It's the public. And so I don't see, I'm looking throughout this proposition, trying to find where the safeguard is. And I can't see one. And I was thinking, well, it can't be a political safeguard because that would undermine the entire purpose of the proposition, is to take politics out of this very difficult, contentious subject, which matters to the public. And the only thought I could come up with is it might be an alternative of having a safeguard where the Controller and Auditor General would be required to produce some kind of certificate or some kind of comment on the work, on the recommendations that are done each time. In some way, which perhaps could be a safeguard built into the rules that we've got. Now, one last comment on obviously the difficult issue of differential pay. I really struggle with this, and I think the most powerful argument I've heard in this meeting so far, or this assembly discussion so far, is the Chief Minister. I mean, this is maybe a personal thing, not like I'd ever even think of that, but the onerous nature of that role, where you are solely accountable 24/7, and the whole island expects you to be able to take responsibility and sort anything out, is astonishing. And I think, should we close our minds, because that's, I think, by voting against this point 7, one would be closing our mind entirely to any variation there. And I think, since we're producing a new system, is it wise to close our mind to that? And I mean, I don't think it is. I think, one, it should remain open, and I don't agree with Deputy Tellier that if you have an open mind, you necessarily predetermine that there will be differential pay, and that's why it's not being predetermined. It means that your mind is not closed to the possibility that there could be some way of accommodating those excess position situations that occur. Having said that, I buy absolutely into all the said about the workloads of scrutiny and scrutiny members. I've done that myself. I absolutely buy in 100% to the role of backbench. I have found during my time in office, which I once served as a backbench member and a scrutiny panel chair, and now I serve as a minister, that they're all full-time. They're full-time roles. But it's just different. You end up doing different work. And I absolutely buy into what Deputy Ward said. There is a complete imbalance of resource available to backbench members to do scrutiny work, to do constituency work, and particularly I know, and I felt this myself, and members will know, is that when you take on a ministerial role, in my position, because I'm a single constituency member, it does affect my ability to do constituency work, which has been diminished. And I'm so grateful for other members who have helped me out by taking on that. And of course, that's what I used to do when I was a backbench member. I used to end up doing so many planning cases all over the island. But and I was, content to do that, because I know that other members or in other roles don't have that capacity because of the onerous natures of their role. So there's no question. Every role in the States, whatever you is, it's full time. So I absolutely buy into this, but it still doesn't mean that I think that a future arrangement should close its mind. And so I will, I won't be standing again. As I've said, I'm hopeful members will find those comments useful. And I wish the chairman of TPC and the future, whoever they are, that this new arrangement should produce a result that people can be content with and in the future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. There's a question for the Attorney General. Deputy Tadia.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I wanted to ask whether or not the repeal of Article 44 and would allow for the body to recommend that leaders of political parties be paid more. So I know their position doesn't come automatically from being in the States, but is that something that they could look at to pay political party leaders extra money?
Attorney General.
It's the Solicitor General. The answer to that is simply by repealing Article 44, you would simply remove the legal prohibition that exists at the moment on variance in remuneration for members. If you wish to have a system in which a party political system in which those holding high office in the party were to be remunerated, other than by donations from party members, then you would need to legislate for that by adding something into the States of Jersey law or some other law to give effect to that suggestion.
So supplementary. So I presume that would have to happen for any kind of increase in pay for any member, whatever the reason was for it. And if that is the case, is it something that the states could then vote against? So, for example, if the remuneration body said we think the chief minister and all political leaders should be paid, political party leaders should be paid more, could the states then not enforce that, not adopt that? And if they could not adopt it, doesn't that kind of undermine what the independence of the board? So we'd be debating our own pay effectively.
Well, it depends, I think, what system is created. If a law is enacted which gives states members the final say on what the remuneration should be, then it would be within the power of the Assembly to either agree or disagree with any particular award. The other way of dealing with it would be a purely political one, where by agreement, changes in remuneration were dealt with through a proposition, and members would have the chance to vote on whether they agreed with certain pay awards, that wouldn't be binding. It would be political consequences would flow if the will of the Assembly was then ignored. It just depends on what system the states decided to go for.
So sorry, this is hopefully the last point, but I thought that propositions to debate states members' pay were not allowed. So I don't know how, if this was adopted in its entirety, we could then have a proposition lodged that debated our own levels of pay. Did that come through, sir?
Yes, it did. Mr. Solicitor, have you got any response to that?
I wasn't sure whether that was a question or an observation that was being made. I'm not aware, and maybe you, sir, as presiding officer, are, whether there's a prohibition on propositions to discuss remuneration. I can't, I think, help the deputy any more than I have already tried to, which is to say that it depends on what system the state decides to adopt, either a statutory system in which the states will have a say, or some other system. I'm not sure I can really assist much further than that.
Yes, Deputy, this of course is a proposition with a view to legislation being drafted, and it's setting out in general terms the Assembly's view as to the form in which the legislation will take. The legislation itself will be debated again, of course, in due course.
So it's just that Part B2 says propositions to alter the level of remuneration for states members should not be permitted. So I don't see how we would get a second chance to debate. I mean, that's what the Solicitor General suggested, is that we could debate any changes to our pay that were being proposed by the board. But of course, if we adopt Part B2, then we can't debate that. We just have to, they just have to come into force, presumably without a debate. That's what I'm asking.
This is an in-principle decision, and there will be a debate on the legislation and any standing orders in due course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Contab of St John.
Thank you, sir. I hope members will indulge me. While some will have discussed members' pay more times than they care to remember, this is my first debate on the subject. What upsets Jersey residents? Well, many things, but I dare say politicians' pay is on many people's lists with many different views. Some will say we are paid too much. Some we are paid too little to attract good candidates. Lots of people say, and I'm sure you all have all heard this, he or she wouldn't earn that kind of money in any other job, with others claiming that we're only in it for the money. As we know, and as was clearly conveyed yesterday, being a politician isn't easy. The hours are long, the pressure is constant, yet you get stick and you can be fired every 4 years. Or in my case, I have a 14-month contract. Sir, there are easier ways to make money. So why do we stand for election? Is it just about public service? Is it the buzz, the power? Are some members simply addicted to the role? Sir, people have made reference to other jurisdictions. Maybe instead of debating members' pay, we should be debating the length of time a person can spend in office. 8 years? 12 years? Before I upset my colleagues, perhaps I'll leave that for another day. So we heard from the Deputy Chief Minister earlier in the debate that nowhere else is pay the same. Well, I don't think that is correct. MEPs, for example, all receive the same pay. We must also remember that we are not employees. We are all office holders. The Constable of St Martin gave what I thought was a compelling speech yesterday. Sir, I apologise now for my lack of colour today. There goes my bonus. Instead of talking about bonuses for politicians, perhaps our time would be better spent debating incentives for how our civil service should receive their rewards. Should their salaries be based on a more commercial footing with lower basic pay, but the ability to earn more should they exceed targets? So, in my view, the public ultimately decide if members get a bonus when they go to the ballot box and decide to re-elect members or not, whether they terminate their contracts. This is generally based on the perceived performance and not necessarily the effort put in by a member. If people don't enter politics for money, I'm fully aware that the lack of money certainly puts people off. As Senator Mezek said yesterday, and others have said today, it is a full-time job. Personally, I lost count of the amount of times I was asked to put my name forward for election. I have waited for years to be in a financial position to be able to stand and represent people in this assembly. When faced with the decision of doing something you really want to do or providing for your family, I'm sure the vast majority would always put their family commitments first. So if we get paid more or less, would that make a difference? What the public are really interested in isn't how much we are paid. No, what really matters is how we perform. Do we deliver what is needed? There has been some good work done in recent years and is continuing to be done about diversification in this assembly. Are we doing enough to attract leaders? People with real experience? Would more pay attract those kind of people? Or would quicker decision making be better? Perhaps rather than fewer members, we should have had more members sharing the workload and therefore reducing the time commitment, allowing some to have other interests. Has everyone having payment made being a states member a full-time job, leading to lengthy debates rather than sharp decisions? Perhaps the terms of reference should extend to training. What level of investment is there in members' continued professional development? Sir, I will be voting against repealing Article 44. I made a submission many years ago, I think around 2006, to the body who was looking at states pay at the time. And back then, I wrote in favour of all members being paid the same. I had similar concerns back then to those expressed earlier in this debate. Sir, I haven't changed my view. In the report, it recommends that the Chief Minister is paid £15,000 more. Why not 30,000 or 5,000? The same with ministers. The recommendation is to pay £7,500 more. Why not 10,000 or 5,000? And what about others? The Chief Minister has a deputy. Is that role not worth more? He also has assistants. 3, I think. Is their work not valued? And as for the ministers, are they all worth the same value? I'm talking about the roles and not the individuals. They all do important work, but we have ministers who are on the Emergencies Council and some not. Then we have ministers who are on the Competent Ministers Group and others not. What value is put on these groups? And what about their assistants? And those who are assistants to do this, assistant to that, and in some cases, assistant to the other. Do they get an increment? Does the assistant minister for this, that, and the other get 3 increments? So if ministers don't want to do the role for the same salary as other members, my advice is quite simple. Don't allow your name to go forward for such roles. I hope the Chair will address some of the concerns about pay differentials when she sums up. In my experience as both a negotiator for employees and negotiating on behalf of the employer, once you have pay differentials, the people at the bottom work hard to close the gap, and the people who are at the top want to keep widening the gap. I'm sure some members will be familiar with various models on job evaluations, including hay. There used to be a saying amongst staff and trade unions, make hay whilst the sun shines, and I'm sure that is still true today. Linking pay to an index is a good idea, as long as it is observed and consistent. Sir, surely this assembly could link the current pay to an index. We do it for pensioners, and it features heavily in pay negotiations. So that should be easy. Like Deputy Young, I do prefer an independent body rather than an individual. But one of my concerns with the proposal is that each new PPC will have its own review, and rather than this assembly, it will be the PPC of the day that will dictate matters for the independent body, rather than remaining independent continuously. Sir, what is certainly important for me is that we do not need to pay members so that no that we do need to pay members so that no one is disbarred from standing. We should never forget the position where people like the late Norman Le Brocq couldn't stand. We don't need an assembly full of wealthy people or people like me who have retired. We need an assembly that is representative and actually delivers for the island. Sir, as I said at the start, this is my first speech on the subject, and members will be pleased to know that I certainly hope it will be my last on the matter. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Colin Tarr. Does any other member wish to speak on this proposition? If no other member wishes to speak, I call upon Deputy Alves to reply.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank all members for their contributions today and yesterday. I think there's been a lot of interesting points raised and suggestions made, so thank you again. I'm going to start by addressing the concern regarding whether I would expect there to be a sole reviewer or a body. Now, this has been mentioned quite a few times yesterday and today. The proposition does allow for both. I can't speak on behalf of the committee, but personally, I would expect there to be more than one person. I would like to see a body, ideally, as I feel it's important to have more than one person looking at things. And I imagine it will probably be a consultancy firm, but it could be a consortium of individuals. I would like to thank Deputy Young for raising some interesting points around safeguarding. I think the safeguard will be the statutory review and the appointments process, but I recognise the deputy's worries, and this could be dealt with in law drafting. A possible solution could be a caveat power for the GRIFIA to commission a review of recommendations before they are implemented, for example, and PPC will consider this further. It's also important to note that whoever will be commissioned by PPC, a proper procurement process will be followed, and they will have to be approved by the PPC of the time. This proposition is to authorise the drawing up of a law, so a lot of the detail will be in the law, including. I'm just hearing that there's an echo.
Yes, there's a little echo. We can hear 95% of what you're saying. I don't know if you can remedy it.
I'll try not to speak so loud. Is that better?
We can't tell yet. You've got to say more to us.
Okay. Okay, so this proposition is to authorise the drawing up of a law. So a lot of the detail will be in the law, including how the reviewer is appointed to ensure independence. Is that better, sir?
Yes.
Thank you. The Constable of St Brelard posed the question yesterday on how does PPC intend to take on board public perception of what states members' activities and the expectation of what they may be paid. I'm sure the Constable is aware that there is a body of work currently being undertaken by PPC and the GREF to promote and raise awareness of what members do. I believe some members have been asked to be filmed during their day-to-day duties, and the GREF's digital and public engagement team will be putting all of this together to then put out to the public. There is also work going on with the Political Engagement and Education Subcommittee that I also chair to look at implementing a fully resourced and consistent education programme into schools. We are currently at the stage of looking to trial something in a local secondary school. And there is also the work going on from the Diversity Forum to encourage and promote a diverse range of candidates to consider standing, and events will be hosted where potential candidates can ask questions and gain information on what members do. I also hope that if this proposition is adopted, this new reviewer system will interact more with states members in order to gain a good understanding of what we do, and that they will be empowered to communicate this to the public, as this is an area that some members touched on yesterday that was lacking. There is a requirement under Part 6 of this proposition for reviewers to consult with states members. Also, further to Deputy Young's contribution, I would also like to take this opportunity to encourage members to contribute to the work of the Democratic Accountability and Governance Subcommittee, which is led by Senator Varwell. I'd like to urge members to submit their views, as there's been a severe lack of submissions from current members, and the subcommittee will be presenting current themes in a Teams meeting soon, and also carrying out workshops on specific areas. With regard to collecting views of the public and the expectation of what members may be paid, I believe the previous States Members Remuneration Review Body conducted some market research and focus groups. So I would expect that the new reviewers would look to undertake similar work, and they will have a budget to conduct this research, as did the previous body. Differential pay, it was really good to hear a range of views about this and the possible issues around it, like blackmail, for example. Deputy Tadia's comments that an e-petition on members' pay, which reaches the 500 signatures mark, could be debated is correct. Members would have to agree to debate it, and that would be an in-committee debate with no proposition attached to it. So there wouldn't be a real outcome from that. Personally, I see Senator Farnham's point that no other organisation pays all their employees the same, but I also agree with the points that Deputy Higgins excuse me, has raised, amongst others, around the volume of constituency work some members have and the lack of administrative support for backbenchers in comparison with ministers. Although this is improving through the Greffiers Department, and I am grateful for this, as I'm sure other members are too. Again, I cannot comment for the committee as a whole, but my personal view is that I am not completely against differential pay. I do think there is merit to giving the Chief Minister an additional allowance, but it is very difficult to quantify other members' workloads. I don't feel it would be right to merely be dependent on whether they've decided to be a chair of a committee or a panel, for example. And I think Deputy Ward made this point quite well when he spoke about attendance and being an active participation. I see there's a point of clarification, so I'm happy to pause there.
Thank you very much. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me? I wasn't sure if I unmuted.
Yes, we can hear you, yes.
Thank you. I would like to check with the chair if we will go with Article 44. If we will keep Article 44, would it be a possibility to review differential pay to Chief Minister?
Thank you, Deputy Gardner, for that. I do actually have that. I'm going to address that in the next part of my speech, so I'll cover it there. If there's anything that I haven't covered, then please do feel free to interrupt me again. So on the differential pay, personally, I won't be supporting it, but I think the point that Deputy Gardner has just raised there, and I will touch on just later on. I just wanted to address a point that Deputy Morrell raised regarding the automatically adopting the reviewers' recommendations without the facility for them to provide us with an explanation. An explanation of where all the recommendations put forward have come from will be covered in a supporting report from the reviewers. So the requirement for the review to produce a report with a rationale for recommendations will be included in the law drafting instructions. So Deputy Morrell also mentioned whether Part 4 would fall away, and this is in reference to the different levels of pay for different roles if the Assembly voted against Article 4. And I also thank the Deputy of St Mary for emailing me his thoughts overnight on this. Part 4 would still be valid because the reviewers can still recommend it, but it would be left for the states to debate on whether to implement it or not. So on the point that Deputy Gardner's just raised there, because members have expressed different options with regard to pay, by having this included in Part 4, it leaves the facility for reviewers to look into it, which I think is important based on the various suggestions members have made in their speeches, but it cannot automatically be implemented if the Assembly votes against Article 44, as that would not have the Assembly mandate. I hope I've addressed all of the common themes that came up during this debate. I'd like to thank members again for their contributions, and I maintain the proposition and call for the appel with a separate vote on part B7. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. So in terms of the vote on the proposition, would it be convenient to you if members first voted on A to B6 inclusive, then on B7, which deals with Article 44, and then finally on the remainder of the proposition, that's B8, 9 and 10 and C. You content with that?
Yes, I'm happy with that, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, accordingly,
so may I ask a question? Sorry, I couldn't raise my hand. I've lost the button, sir. But I wonder if it might be feasible to take the vote on B7 first, because if, for example, the states agreed not to allow a differential in pay to be allowed, that might impact on the way members want to vote on the main proposition.
well, that would be dealt with the fact that you're voting on C at the end, which is the request on PPC to bring forward changes.
Oh, understood. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. So in a moment, the greffier will put a vote in the chat channel, and that vote is now open, and members are voting on A, B1 to B6 inclusive, if it's in paper, the first page of the proposition. And the vote is now open. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The first part of the proposition has been adopted unanimously. 40 votes pour in the link and 4 votes pour in the chat, making a total of 44 votes pour and no votes contra. The next vote will be on paragraph B7 of the proposition, which deals with Article 44 and whether or not that should be repealed to permit the independent reviewer to consider the option of introducing different levels of pay for different roles.
So may I just confirm something?
Yes.
So voting against this means that it's effectively voting against differential pay. I just want to confirm because of the wording.
Yes. So if you're voting for, then you'll be voting for the in principle abolition of Article 44. There's a question from Deputy Gardner. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And again, I would like clarification because I'm a bit confused, even follow the previous. Voting for, vote against, does it mean that review for differential pay will not take place and it cannot be brought back to the Assembly?
No, it doesn't mean that, because you've heard from Deputy Alves that the proposal, and of course this is only a proposition, not legislation, but the proposal is that the independent reviewer may consider different levels of pay for different roles. That will have no effect whilst Article 44 remains in place.
Okay, thank you.
So, and thank you. So votes for B7 are in favour of the repeal of the article which requires all states members to be paid the same amount. Votes contra are against repeal of that provision. I now invite the greffier to put a vote in the link, which he has done. I ask members to cast their votes accordingly. We got a clear up 25 by one way or the other. I ask the greffier, if all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, to close the voting. So that part of the proposition has been rejected. On the link,
can we have the for and contra, please?
On the link, 14 votes for and 25 contra. On the chat, 4 votes for, making a total of 18 votes for and 25 contra.
Those who voted for were the Constable of Grouville, Senator Farnham, Deputy Lewis, Deputy Ash, Deputy Young, Deputy Martin, Constable of St Helier, Deputy Guida, Deputy Labby, Deputy of St Peter, Deputy of Trinity, Constable of St Peter, Deputy of St John, Deputy Gardner, and in the chat I also saw Deputy Masson, the Constable of St Mary, Constable of Trinity, and a Constable of St Saviour. And those who voted, find the right button, those who voted contra were Deputy Aye, Deputy Alves, Deputy of St Martin, Senator Valvar, Constable of St John, Deputy Ward, Deputy Grouville, Deputy Tadier, Deputy Higgins, Senator Pallett, Senator Ferguson, Constable of St Martin, Deputy of St Mary, Deputy Morel, Deputy Lehegre, Senator Moore, Deputy Pamplin, Deputy of St Juan, Constable of St Lawrence, Constable of St Brelard, Deputy Truscott, Constable of St Juan, Senator Mezek, Deputy Pennell, and Deputy Dubé.
We now come to the third and final vote on the balance of the proposition from B Roman 8 to C inclusive, and I invite the greffier to place a link in the chat. He has done so, and I ask members to cast their votes. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the third part of the proposition has been adopted. 38 votes for on the link, no contra, and 1 abstention. On the chat, there were 3 additional votes for, making 41 votes for, 2 votes contra, making 2 votes contra, and 1 abstention.
May we have the contra and the abstention, please?
The votes contra were Senator Farnham and the Constable of St Saviour, and the abstention was Deputy Doubley.
Accordingly, the proposition has been adopted with the exception of B Roman 7. That concludes the public business for this meeting, and I invite the Chair of PPC to propose the arrangement of public business for future meetings. Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. There have been a number of changes to the arrangement of public business since the consolidated order paper was published, with an additional 9 items being lodged. All of these items have been listed for the meeting of the 20th of July 2021. Looking at the next meeting, there are a number of items down for discussion. A lot of this is legislation, so I would expect a meeting on Thursday may be needed as well. I've been informed by a few members that there is that we'll be proposing a reducing in lodging time, and I believe the Minister for the Environment has also informed me that he wishes to propose an in-committee debate on the report of the Citizens' Assembly. So with that, sir, I propose the arrangement of public business as shown on the consolidated paper with the changes that have been identified. Thank you.
Thank you. A number of members wish to speak. Deputy Guida, you did wish to speak, although you've gone from my chat. Deputy Guida?
Yes, sir. I would like to request from PPC that we bring forward P55, which is the appointment of a member of the Jersey Police Complaint Authority. This would normally have been scheduled for the 20th of July, and I would like to bring it to the next sitting. These are voluntary positions, and over the holiday period, the Police Complaint Authority, of course, will lose some of their members, and it is primordial that they have as many as possible available to receive complaints from the public even during the holidays.
Thank you. Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. As the chairman of PPC said, I asked the Assembly, please, sir, to approve an in-committee debate on the report of the Citizens' Assembly on achieving carbon neutrality, and I would like that debate to be held on July the 20th. We need to plan for it now, sir. Just to highlight to the Assembly, of course, the commitment to having an in-committee debate was in fact an explicit a requirement of P127 2019 in the appendix to that report, sir. So that's why I please formally make the request to include that within the agenda for the 20th of July Assembly, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Doubley.
Yeah, apologies, sir. This might be a ring binder moment, but De Greffier read out my vote for the last vote as abstain, and I had intended to vote poor. I'm not sure if it was an error on the computer or an error on my part, but if I could just record my intention there for the record, please.
Yes, for the record, that'll be recorded, but I'm afraid to say your vote will remain as abstention, but that's recorded for the record. Conatable of St Brelard.
Thank you, sir. It was really just to clarify a point that was made with regard to the drawing in P39 for scrutiny. I think we mentioned yesterday the 4th of October. Of course, it is the sitting commencing the 5th of October, and it's just to clarify that point. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Deputy Alves, you want to respond to what Deputy Guida and Deputy Young have said about P55 and the in-committee debate?
Sorry, sir, I think you missed out the Constable of St One. He said he wanted to speak earlier.
Thank you very much. Conatable of St One.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I'm speaking in my capacity as Assistant Minister for External Relations, and my Minister has asked me to ask for the Assembly's indulgence that on the 29th of June, we take draft taxation, partnership and economic substance as the first item of public business. And the reason for this is that we are required to notify the EU whether this has been successful or otherwise by the 30th of June. and ask the Assembly's indulgence to be able to do this as the first item, sir.
So you want to take P47 first?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
That's your proposal?
Yeah.
Right. Deputy Alves?
Thank you, sir. I'm happy to proceed with those things unless I don't see that any member is against it. So, are
you going to propose public business on the footing that P47 is taken first on the 29th of June, P55 is brought forward to the 29th of June, and there's an in-committee debate on the 20th of July, as mentioned by Deputy Young?
yes, sir. I believe Deputy Ward's just said that he would like to speak on that, sir.
Yes, of course. Deputy Ward.
Sorry, so it wasn't actually on that. It's a couple of things. So if you want to deal with that first, it was some slightly separate things.
Can we go back to public business then, Deputy Alves?
Yes, sir. So, and with that, I propose the arrangement of public business. Thank you.
Yes, I think I need to hear from Deputy Ward now, because once we've dealt with public business, that's the end of the meeting.
Yeah, thank you, sir. It was two things. One is I can see certain arrangements that need to be firmed up. The in-committee debate, will we be allocating a particular time or afternoon or session? Because they can be very messy if they go over time. Just thinking about that arrangement, and we may not know now, but I wonder if we can be let know in advance. The second thing is as well that given what was just said regards, actually it is linked to that, the taxation need to cover that piece of legislation on the 29th.
Yes.
I am conscious, and I think we all are, that there may be ministerial positions that may be debated around that time. I don't know, but if so, that could actually take a lot of the 29th after questioning. And I wonder whether it might be something that needs to be considered. And it may help Chair of PPC. I think we've got a very difficult decision to make here. If the Chief Minister or the government decided on when those would be happening, because it may mean starting in the afternoon beforehand if for that taxation to go through on that day. It just occurred to me that that could be I think the technical phrase is a spanner in the works. I don't know. Thank you, sir.
Well, the elections for any new ministerial positions will take place before public business in the usual way.
Exactly so, and they could perhaps take a long time. I don't know. It was just a suggestion.
Well, if there's a...
I know the Greffier is shaking his head at me, so I'll take his knowledge beyond mine.
Yes, the Greffier is confident we can dispose of those matters within time, but if there is any particular emergency, then we can consider that on the day. In terms of the in-committee debate, the duration of that debate is a matter for the presiding officer. Normally at least a half a day is allowed, but you're right, people need to know where they stand well before the time, and I'm sure that will be catered for. Deputy Tadia, you want something to say?
Yeah, it's to ask about P55. So, have we decided to bring that forward, and if at what point do we decide whether that gets taken early or just listed?
That's been proposed by Deputy Alves, and I'm going to ask someone to second it in a minute, and then anyone wants to speak against bringing it forward, then they may do so. Deputy Young,
Sir,
thank you.
Yes, I did want to just respond to Deputy Ward, if I may, about the preparation for the in-committee debate. You've obviously covered, sir, the discussion, the consideration of the time of debate. Obviously, it's your domain, sir. I wanted to assure Deputy Ward that it is intended to produce some kind of structured discussion document, which will be published before the in-committee debate, and obviously we've already got the full report of the Citizens Assembly in R95 2021. This will be to facilitate that discussion, sir, and the content of that my intention is to discuss that with and agree that with the Council of Ministers at its next meeting, sir, as was exactly agreed in the process that the states approved would be followed, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Young. So is public business as proposed by the chairman of PPC seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does anyone wish to speak on the business as proposed. Are members to content to proceed with public business? Oh yes, Deputy Tadia, you wish to speak.
Thanks, sir. What I was getting at with my question is that is it being proposed that we move? It's being proposed with the P55 being moved. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with it being moved, but I don't think this is right to do that. I think we should have a separate decision on whether or not to. As a rule, I think we should have separate decisions on whether we shorten the lodging periods or list something on a order paper before it can be listed, because we're just eroding the lodging periods by doing this. I think that's a separate matter to discuss. I'm really uncomfortable about this. There may be good reasons, but the test remains that the public interest must be proven before we reduce lodging periods.
Well, yes,
Sorry.
Can I just finish what I was saying? There will be a separate vote on the lodging period, merely because it's been brought forward to be listed for debate. Does not mean the lodging period has been reduced. There'll be a separate vote on that in due course.
I get that, but I still think the point stands that in order to move it onto the order paper, there's a presumption that it can be taken, and I think that needs to happen separately as well.
So I missed your last point, Dr. Tadia.
Sorry, so I just think that these are separate issues. We decide whether or not to put this on the order paper, then we decide whether or not to take business as scheduled. I don't think we should do it all together. That's what I'm saying.
Well, no, the business has been proposed in the way that it's been proposed by the chair of PPC. It is in order for her to propose it in the form she's proposed it, and members must vote on that. Does any member wish to speak on this before it's either put to the vote or agreed on, as it were, a standing vote? Thank you. I think in the circumstances, public business has been. Deputy Guida.
Yes, sorry. If public interest needs to be discussed on the taking of P55 earlier, it is quite simple. Again, because of the holidays and the few people that constitute this voluntary organization, there might be a time where there are no people available to take public complaints about the police. So I am in the hands of the Assembly, but bringing this forward by 3 weeks would allow us to have an additional member in the authority who would be available during the summer. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I now propose to, public business has been proposed for the next meeting. I now propose to invite the Greffier to put a link in the chat as to whether or not public business as proposed should proceed on the 29th of June. There is a link in the chat to invite members to cast their votes on the proposition made by the chair of PPC. If all members have the opportunity of voting, I ask the Greffier to close the voting. And the proposal for public business for the next meeting has been approved. 36 votes for on the link, 1 contra in the link, and 4 votes in favour on the chat, making a total of 40 votes for. Accordingly, I close the meeting, and the States is adjourned until the 29th of June.